Welcome to the show, everyone. If you are finding this on YouTube, hi, I'm JJ, and this is my show. So I just wanted to warn you that I'm going to talk. And I know you probably are here looking for Dr. Davis. And so if you don't like me, that is totally cool. Dr. Davis, where can they find you if they just want more of just you?
Well, my blog is the busiest place. It's the awkwardly named drdavisinfinitehealth.com blog and the drdavisinfinitehealth.com website. Um, I have several Facebook pages. Unfortunately, my biggest one got hacked by some people in Nigeria and got taken down. So that's no longer around. So I'm having to start from scratch in some ways for the social media part. But there are private Facebook pages that you can access through the blog. For instance, if somebody's new to my programs, I have a wheat belly 10 grain detox challenge page. That's a private page. So you have to be put in physically through my blog. And then, of course, all the books, depending on what you were trying to accomplish, Super Gut for the microbiome, Undoctored for kind of the um, philosophy of why we don't need doctors because they're not doing their job. They're destroying health for the most part. We don't need them, certainly not as much as they tell you we need them. And of course, Wheat Belly, all the Wheat Belly books, cookbooks, etc., lay out all the science and rationale for and how to on this lifestyle.
And of course, his podcast, Defiant Health.
Hmm.
So if you're here on YouTube, you may not know about the podcast because for some reason, some people on YouTube don't listen to podcasts, but we both have podcasts and his is Defiant Health. So if you're listening on the podcast, you figured out by now that we are doing video. So come on over to jjflizanes.tv if you'd like to see our conversation, because of course, it's always a pleasure to be with Dr. William Davis. This is now probably the fifth or sixth time that we've had a conversation, and I love it. I think you're great. So today's conversation is going to be on deceptive diet advice. Now, I was just on Defiant Health recently, promoting the copy of my Invisible Fitness Formula. This is a new edition. And so, because it's 5 secrets to release weight and unbody shame, we kind of started to cover a little bit of, again, diet advice, losing weight, blah, blah, blah. And that really led to a recent study that Dr. Davis has done with one of his products, Gut to Glow, and some of the components in there, and really wanting to track and see what is happening in someone's body, even if they do nothing else. And then that led to also the conversation about what happens in normal, like what's going on right now in the world with dieting and there's weight loss drugs and things that are dangerous. And we really wanted to share that with you. So where do you want to start, Dr. Davis?
Well, a lot of this whole thing I've been doing lately, the last few years, that has shifted a lot of my attention towards what I call shape and body composition. It started with playing with a microbe, of all things, JJ. It was the microbe you know a lot about, Lactobacillus reuteri, a microbe that virtually all of us have lost because it's very susceptible to common antibiotics, even though indigenous hunter-gatherer populations and other mammals like squirrels and deer, and they all have this microbe. We've lost it. And it's it's probably the most important. Microbes are many important microbes, but reuteri is probably at the top of the list of microbes essential for human health, for the way you look, the way you behave, your internal dialogue, your reproductive health. It plays so many roles. Well, so a lot of us make a yogurt. It's not yogurt, of course. It looks and smells like yogurt. We do that to increase bacterial counts of this microbe about 1,000-fold, so we get bigger effects. Well, I have thousands and thousands of people making this Lactobacillus reuteri yogurt, and they're thrilled with the effects. It's delicious, and you eat it with some blueberries and chia seeds or whatever, and you get all kinds of great effects, like a return of youthful strength. It turns off appetite. It increases libido. It increases testosterone in guys by about 50%. Older ladies in their late 60s and onwards who suffer from things like loss of libido and vaginal dryness and irritation, it's restored. The vaginal lining and moisture are restored. It preserves bone density. And because it stimulates oxytocin, you get all those oxytocin effects: love and affection, generosity, acceptance of other people's opinions. But it's the ladies in my audience who say, oh, we don't care about that. We just want better skin. I said, what? Really? Okay. All right. So I did a little clinical study, human study, all ladies, 25 ladies, and we asked them, please don't change your diet. Don't change your exercise program. Just do what you're doing. But take these four things: Lactobacillus reuteri at high counts, not as the yogurt, this is in a capsule form now, and components missing from the modern human diet. As you know, JJ, the modern dietary advice, cut your fat and cholesterol, is an unmitigated disaster. It has contributed to the worldwide epidemics of obesity, type 2 diabetes, dementia, and many other conditions. And yet the USDA, nobody's offering any explanations or apologies. They say, do more of it, which is, as you know, is complete insanity. So the cut your fat, cut your cholesterol mistake, the blunder, led to abandoning many things in diet, not just fat and cholesterol, but also such things as collagen and hyaluronic acid. These are only obtained from animals and specifically from organs. So modern people, they say, oh, I don't want to eat brain or heart or tongue or intestines or stomach. And they do really crazy things, right? Eat boneless, skinless chicken breast. Oh my God. Absent all the collagen, hyaluronic acid. So we have a modern situation where we're absent collagen, hyaluronic acid. Those have they have youth preserving effects. They smooth your skin. They increase muscle. They nourish the microbiome. They reduce blood sugar. They reduce insulin, reverse insulin resistance. They shrink your waist. So we had the ladies get rotary with collagen and hyaluronic acid. And then I added the carotenoid, astaxanthin, because people who get their diet through a drive-through window or a fast food or order through and get it in clamshell, we're not getting the full array of nutrients. One of the casualties of that style of eating are carotenoids. It could be beta carotene, could be lutein, zeaxanthin, cryptozan. There's a whole bunch of these things. We can't get everything into a capsule, right? So I chose the most potent carotenoid of all, which is astaxanthin, about tenfold more potent in antioxidative capacity than other carotenoids. And there's also good evidence that it shapes your body. It causes you to burn fat and shrinks your waist, even by itself. So anyway, we give these 4 things to these ladies. Don't change your diet. Don't change exercise. We do something called high-resolution skin ultrasound to measure the thickness of the dermal layer of skin. And we saw an unprecedented increase in dermal thickness, 15%. If you take collagen or hyaluronic acid alone, you're lucky to get 6 to 7% increase. So over 90 days, we got 15% increase, twice what you would expect otherwise. And increased skin moisture, reduction in fine wrinkles like crow's feet and smile lines. Well, what took me by surprise, we just happened to measure waist circumference just because it's free. It's just so easy to do. It was a study for skin, so we didn't do a lot of other things. We did some blood work and other, but we measured waist circumference. To my great surprise, the ladies lost huge amounts of waist circumference, about 7.2 centimeters. Some ladies as much as 21.6 centimeters or 8.5 inches. Now, even more interesting, JJ. So they lost a huge amount of waist circumference, abdominal fat, but didn't lose weight. Now, how in the world can that be?
Oh,
How can
oh,
you?
I know, I know, I know.
I know
Can
this is
I
one of
play?
your areas of interest. So, yes, an increase in muscle, consistent with the animal evidence, consistent with what I'm seeing in humans. Personally, for instance, when I did this, I gained 13 pounds of muscle. My strength increased 50%. And so that's what I'm seeing in humans. And so I think we've uncovered a way. Now, this is completely different than what you get with a horrible class of drugs that my colleagues call miracles, the GLP-1 agonist drugs like Wegovy, Ozempic, and Mounjaro. Those are horrible drugs, not just because they cause nausea, vomiting, pancreatitis, and thyroid disease, not just because of that, and not just because they cost a lot of money, like $1,000 a month, but because what happens with those drugs is, let's say you pay $12,000 for a year's worth of Wegovy, inject yourself, you endure the nausea, etc., you lose 40 pounds. And my colleagues say, it's magical, it's wonderful, it's a breakthrough, it's life-changing. You lose 40 pounds, you stop the drug because most people can't afford that indefinitely, and you regain 32 to 34 pounds very quickly, and which is almost all fat. So of the 40 pounds lost, 10 pounds or so, sometimes much more, is muscle. So think about 10 pounds of ground beef on your kitchen. It's a lot of muscle. You lose 10 pounds of muscle, your basal metabolic rate, the rate at which you burn calories for the work of living, like breathing and digestion, is reduced, dramatically reduced. And so you regain 32 to 34 pounds, often more, and you're more pre-diabetic, more likely to be type 2 diabetic. Your risk for heart disease, dementia, breast cancer is now greater than it was at the start. So our own FDA approved a class of drugs that destroys health in the cause of losing weight temporarily. This is the huge mistake, and it's costing us a huge amount. It's increased the national healthcare bill costs dramatically because so far those companies are putting $10 billion a year in their pocket from that one class of drug. So I think what we've done is we have a way to circumvent all the problems associated with this horrible class of drugs, GLP-1 agonists, because what we're doing is targeting the worst kind of fat, abdominal visceral fat, while preserving or even increasing muscle.
I want to break this down for anyone in my audience who did not track at the speed at which Dr. Davis knows this information. You're like, hold on, wait a minute. Let me break this down, the weight piece. So back as, and I even cover this invisible fitness formula when people are like, I want to lose weight. And I said, okay, great. Next time when you do this study, Dr. Davis, please take their body fat. Please do circumferences of all the areas. Do their neck, do their arm, do their chest, do their hips, do their thigh, and obviously body fat composition, because obviously based on your study, the 8 inches that they lost in their waist and not losing any weight means they gained muscle. But when most people come and say, I want to lose weight, like it's our neighbors went on a diet recently after well, we all did after the holidays, because we had a lot of fun around here. We had a lot of really fun things. And so, January comes around, we're like, okay, we have to pay for our sins. And now it's time to sort of, change things around. And I have known them for a little bit, a couple of years, but I've never seen them really be concerned about not eating certain things, right? So all of a sudden they have taken like everything out of their diet. And of course, Doug asks them, is it working? And the wife says, oh yeah, I lost 8 pounds. Now I didn't say anything because she wasn't asking, but I thought I wanted to tell her, well, the 8 pounds you lost was water. So don't get so excited yet. Like it was water. It wasn't, and who knows, it could have been a little bit of muscle too, but it was definitely water. So when you look at the scale and you get on the scale, you are literally measuring. Let me remind all of you, when you step on the scale, which by the way, I do not always recommend. I have a chapter in the book called your addiction, like ditching the scale or something. It's about the addictions that you have to the scale to let you know that you're doing well, you're failing, or you're improving. You have no idea, unless you have a very sensitive scale that tests your water content and your muscle mass, what you're losing. When you step on the scale, you are weighing your entire body, your blood, your skin, your bones, your organs, any food that's in digestive tract, your everything in you, you are weighing. And so when that number goes up or down, you don't know what it went up, like what went up. You could have lost muscle, you could have lost water. Water is the easiest thing to lose and gain. So the first initial weight loss all the time is water. But then over a course of time, and then like Dr. Davis was explaining through the drugs, you're also losing muscle mass, especially if you're not doing anything to keep it on. So your metabolism, your resting metabolism, the amount of, think about it like the gas tank in your car. Your gas tank holds how much gas? It's funny, I don't even know what my gas tank holds, but whatever, because I know when it's on, but most men would probably know, oh, my gas tank holds 17 gallons, whatever. All right, well, you know what that is. So your body, your resting metabolism, which is based on your hormones and your muscle mass. Okay. Your hormones and your muscle mass, which is needing energy. That is your sitting, resting. This is how much energy I need in calories, right? So when you lose muscle and you lose hormones, right, then your body doesn't need the same amount of calories or energy anymore. So your metabolism lowers. So when you go on these crazy diets and you lose muscle and you don't even know you're doing it, you're killing yourself by then sitting in, now you need less. So if you needed, the average woman, when I was a personal trainer, the average woman over 50 after menopause, so let's say 55, 60, had a resting metabolism of under 1,000. So if you didn't work out, if you didn't build muscle, you are playing the calorie game of basically fasting all the time or eating 800 calories. And they wondered why they yo-yoed and they could never get it right. I remember a woman who hired me as a trainer when I first moved to California, and she was doing an hour a day, 5 days a week on the treadmill. She lost 5 pounds in 3 months. I was like, you're doing the wrong exercise. You need to be doing resistance training. So we changed that around. She increased her muscle. She increased her metabolism. She lost the weight. But this isn't about diet and exercise right now as much as is about the idea of what you're being told and the fact that we're all not looking at the right numbers. You're looking at the scale and you're not looking at what your body fat composition is. You're not looking at, who cares? If you like the way you looked, would you care what the number said? I would rather weigh more and look great and not care what that number is if I was full of muscle, which meant I could eat a lot and I could keep eating and I wouldn't have to restrict myself. That's more fun, right? So let's talk about this idea of these drugs, but then also, I mean, why are well, I know why, and you know why. It's the idea of root cause versus symptoms, right? Okay, someone has a symptom and you want them to lose weight because because their symptoms will decrease or they'll start to correct potentially any other thing like diabetes if they lose a lot of weight. But again, the doctors, like you said, are looking at the wrong thing. People are losing water and muscle, and then all of a sudden they go off the drug or they go off the diet, and now they're worse off when they started, and they're gaining the weight back, and it's this vicious cycle. But so, what is the solution in terms of now? I know what your solution is, and I want to help promote that solution. But what is our solution when you're having those conversations or when you're hearing the things about the weight loss drugs and the doctors? Let's say somebody's doctor says to them, you need to lose weight. I'm going to prescribe this because you're obese and blah, blah, blah. And you have for 20 years not been willing to exercise or change your diet. So here's the drug. What would you recommend?
Running away because it's clear, as you know, JJ, the drugs are a disaster. Yeah, you lose the weight for maybe a year. Maybe you drop from a size, whatever, 36 to a size 8 or 10, but you're going to regain it all. So, as you recall, all forms of conventional weight loss, whether it's cutting calories, we might call it move more, eat less, we might call it push the plate away or whatever, but reducing calorie intake or a GLP-1 agonist drug that reduces calorie intake, that's how they work, or a bariatric procedure like lap band or gastric bypass. They're all variations on the same theme, reducing calories. And we know with good evidence that all those methods lead to loss of muscle, and you well know the implications of that, and thereby reduction in basal metabolic rate. And so, one of the best, most instructive studies was the so-called Biggest Loser study, in which the participants, the graduates of the 8th season of that show, so these poor people, of course, are essentially tortured to slash calorie intake and engage in a minimum of 3 hours per day of strength training and aerobic exercise. And they did have wonderful results up front. 70 pounds, 130 pounds lost. They look great. They leave the show. And interestingly, these people, every last one of them, maintained a low-calorie diet and a moderate exercise program. Exercise that you and I would probably find to be kind of extreme. It's a lot of exercise, but they continued it after they left the show, and they all regained the weight. Now, other studies have shown when you regain that weight, you're worse off than you were at the start because you don't regain muscle. You regain very little muscle. You regain almost all fat and mostly abdominal fat, the inflammatory type fat. There's a very instructive study from the NIH, the National Institutes of Health. That study, the Biggest Loser study, was also an NIH group, so it's coming from good sources. There's another NIH group who did another kind of study. For about 6 months, they took people who were super obese, BMIs of 50, so super overweight, put them on a low-calorie diet, and an extreme exercise program, kind of like Biggest Loser, but in this case, 6 days a week, 2 hours a day, strength training and aerobic exercise. They lost an extraordinary amount of weight, about 123 pounds, of which 23 pounds was muscle. So they weren't followed up, but we know what happens when you lose that much muscle, 23 pounds of muscle, your basal metabolic rate. And in this study, they did show this. The basal metabolic rate, the rate at which you burn calories, plummeted. And that effect lasts for years. It's not temporary. It's not days or weeks or months. It's years. The longest any study has documented is 6 years, and then they just stop measuring it. So it's at least 6 years where you are sensitive to any. So they eat a low-calorie diet. They're hungry all the time, and they regain 70 pounds, 130 pounds. So we have more than enough evidence, as you know, JJ, that the conventional methods to lose weight do not work. And in fact, they destroy health. So you make the crucial point. So exercise is part of the solution. So in that NIH study, they still so most diets, GLP agonists or bariatric procedure, you lose about 25%. 25% of the weight lost is muscle. In that NIH study with extreme exercise, about 18%. So it did blunt it, but did not prevent it. They still lost 23 pounds of muscle. So how can you, if strength training doesn't work, or only partially, what else is there? Well, I would call oxytocin, that is you obtain via restoration of reuteri, the hormone of shape and body composition. People think of it as this thing that rises when you hug someone you love or your dog. Yeah, that's not sure it does for a few seconds. We're talking about around the clock internal production of oxytocin to high levels that you obtain incredibly by restoration of this hormone, of this microbe, reuteri, and thereby oxytocin. And we're going to amplify, I believe, synergistically by restoring those factors lost in modern diet because of the idiocy of low fat, low cholesterol. We're going to replace the cholesterol and hyaluronic acid that you should have gotten by eating heart, tongue, and brain and intestines. And then because of the a reliance on ultra processed foods like cookies, cakes, candies, soft drinks, and garbage like that, people don't take enough carotenoids. Put them all together, and I believe you obtain not only loss of abdominal visceral fat, but a restoration. So in my 60s, JJ, I gained 13 pounds of muscle in 3 weeks. I was going to the gym. I know you're kind of a gym rat, but I can't stand going to the gym. So I go at most 15 minutes once a week to use the machines.
I don't go because I love it. I go because it works and because I know I need it. It's sort of like brushing your teeth and taking a shower and cleaning your house. Like you have to do it. You may not love it, but it's necessary.
Well, here's something interesting. So you do that and you'll regain muscle, but it seems to be dependent on how much muscle you had when you were younger. So when I was a teenager, I used to go to the gym all the time and got all big. Well, so for me, I got this over the top type effect. I was doing lat pull downs, 130 pounds for 10 repetitions. Then I restored reuteri and oxytocin, and it went up within 3 weeks. Going to the gym 15 minutes once a week, it went from 130 pounds to 200 pounds for 10 repetitions. So in my 60s. So in other words, I was starting to handle weights I used to handle when I was in my 20s. And so um, uh, strength training, yes, very helpful, but not enough. When you've lost the reuteri and thereby the hormone of shape and body composition, and you were told wrongly to cut fat and cholesterol and thereby abandon consumption of organ meats rich in collagen and hyaluronic acid. By the way, I tell people don't rely on bone broth. We now have 2 studies that show that bone broth, especially if made with vinegar, is very high in lead because bone is a natural concentrator of lead. And so it doesn't sound very nice, but I tell people don't make bone broth, make carcass broth. So bake your chicken, eat the leg, eat the skin, eat the whatever, save the carcass with lots of ligaments and collagen and cartilage and some bones, and throw whatever else you want in there, celery and spices, herbs. And don't cook it long time. Don't cook it for like 36 hours. Don't do that. And do not add vinegar.
Okay.
Vinegar doubles the lead content of your broth. And so you can get some collagen, you can get some nutrients that way, but it's not the safest way to do it. So make carcass broth if you're going to do that, but not bone broth.
Yeah, no, I'd make carcass broth. And I was never using vinegar, but I did recently because I had heard that it helped to extract minerals. So, and break down the bones. But I'll stop doing that. So, because I always roast a chicken, and then after I roast a chicken, I make broth from the carcass. The whole entire thing goes in the crock pot. Um, but I also take, and because most people don't want to eat organs and tongue and liver and things, so I get it in the pills because literally I'm not going to eat it. And I mean, the thought of it alone, it stops me. I understand it's good for me, but and so I'm trying to do other things. But I want to go back to what you said about the muscle because it's while I am 100% sure based on your results and what you're talking about that we need that restoration in order to have our body convert and change into building muscle. But I just want to say something about building muscle and going to the gym. You can go to the gym and lift weights and do it poorly. Okay. So let's just put that aside. And most people suck at exercise. Okay. I go to the gym there this morning and it's hard for me to look around because, again, no one has taught anyone about anything science related, not only physiology, but biomechanics and physics for crying out loud. People have no idea where gravity is and how to resist a muscle. It just makes me nuts. So because it's a whole bunch of sciences, it's a lot of sciences that you have to put together in order to actually figure out how to properly build muscle. There's physiology involved. People don't understand physiology. They don't understand. Anyway, we could go. I get crazy about it because, again, it's a lot of sciences, and most trainers just have a good body. They were athletic. They're like good cheerleaders, and their people hire them. And then they have no idea what they're doing. They don't have no idea what from one person to the next person, what the difference is and why they would change the program. How would they change the form? How they would change the load? How would they would change the programming? Whatever. But so just that aside, those of you that are exercising and you don't really have not studied, and you think, oh, I've tried resistance training, it didn't work for me. I guarantee you did it wrong. I guarantee it was not because you did it for your body type and for your age and for your joints and for your biomechanical structure and for your physiology of what you needed. And we can't leave out the hormone aspect of this, because I have had friends in gyms years ago who were, instructors, they were trainers, they were spin instructors, doing kind of all the right things. Well, not all the right things. They ate like shit, but they were still young enough that they could have gotten away with that. But it was because of how out of balance hormonally, like men with high estrogen and men with low testosterone. Like, we can't ignore that there is that piece of those hormones that do need to be in place for you to be able to build muscle, not just how you apply resistance to your body on the physics side, but then what's inside of our body. And that's part of what we're talking about. You're talking about something even past what I'm talking about, this restoring reuteri, which is something that's new to me and everybody else, well, new to me since I've met you, and oxytocin, and being able to really make it the most perfect environment for our body to synthesize muscle tissue. And that's what we're talking about. Having these different components are important for being able to build muscle in the most efficient way. And that's just why your strength level went up, because you have the hormones, you probably had good form enough that your body went boom. And then here we go. I'm going to have twice as much strength and muscle as I did 3 weeks ago because I've been taking my wonderful Gut to Glow. Yes?
By sheer dumb luck, JJ, the first I play with a lot of microbes, by the way, because you can use specific microbes to achieve specific benefits. But I chose reuteri to play with first, and it turns out it's probably the most important microbe of all if your interest is shape and body composition. But there's another dimension to the whole reuteri conversation. That is, reuteri is unique in that most microbes will colonize the colon. That's the large bowel that makes the poop and holds your poop until it's convenient to empty your bowels, right? You don't want to do it in a supermarket or when you're making love to someone. You want to control when this happens. But it's the small intestine that's typically not colonized by microbes. Reuteri is unique in that it colonizes this small intestine and colon. So 24 feet of small intestine, where it takes up residence and produces what are called bacteriocins. These are natural antibiotics effective against fecal microbes. Because there's a weird situation in modern people. By my estimation, easily, JJ, 50% of the US population has small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. That is, yeah, colonization of the small intestine by fecal microbes. They're not supposed to be there. Small intestine is not equipped to have trillions of microbes, fecal microbes living there, like E. coli and Salmonella and Citrobacter and Pseudo. These are very bad microbes. They're fine in the colon. The colon's used to it, but the small intestine is not. It has a thin barrier to protect your intestinal lining. It's very permeable because that's where you absorb amino acids and fatty acids and vitamins and minerals. So the small intestine is by design very permeable. But when it's loaded with fecal microbes that live and die rapidly, these microbes only live for hours. They release a lot of their toxic components. And one very toxic component is called endotoxin. It gets into your bloodstream. That's called endotoxemia. Now, I wanted to know way back, how common is this? Because I thought it was rare. But you know what? There's several dozen studies that ask this question. In condition blank, what proportion of people test positive for this condition, SIBO? Usually by hydrogen breath testing, because hydrogen is produced by microbes, not by humans. There's some other methods, but usually hydrogen breath testing, H2 testing. So in condition, let's say obesity, what proportion tests positive? So of the 115 million people in this country who are obese, how many test positive? 50%. So that's about 55, 60 million people right there. How about irritable bowel syndrome? There's 60 to 70 million Americans with irritable bowel. What proportion tests positive? It varies from study to study, but on average, 31%. So what's that? Another 18, 20 million people to add. How about fatty liver? There's about 135 million Americans with fatty liver. What proportion tests positive? About 50%. Now, there's going to be some overlap, an obese type 2 diabetic with fatty liver. But how about add up fibromyalgia, restless leg syndrome, neurodegenerative disorders, autoimmune diseases, type 2 diabetes, prediabetes, coronary. You easily exceed 100 million, probably more towards 150 or more million Americans have this condition. And one of the effects is it causes loss of muscle and increase in abdominal fat. So a lot of the things going on around us is at least in part due to loss of reuteri, loss of oxytocin, and endotoxemia. Restore reuteri, get a boost in oxytocin, a shift in body composition, restoration of youthful muscle, reduction of abdominal visceral fat, reduction of endotoxemia. The reduction in endotoxemia, because one of the effects of endotoxemia is an increase in insulin resistance, the body's poor responsiveness to insulin. So a person, let's take a slender, active person, someone like you. What's your fasting insulin? It's probably near zero, 1, 2 microunits. Let's take that Walmart shopper who's got a big tummy, right? Size 36 pants. That person's insulin's probably 130. It's not a little bit worse. It's 100-fold worse. And insulin is the hormone of weight gain, of fat storage. So high levels of insulin causes abdominal fat to expand. We're going to reduce that. When we reduce endotoxemia by restoring reuteri, we get a dramatic reduction in insulin resistance, and it helps you release that fat. So this microbe, over and over and over again, JJ, is proven to be an incredible friend of the human species.
So you're all probably wondering by now, where do I get it? What is it? What do I have to do? And so I know we've talked about this before on the show, but Dr. Davis has created a product called Gut to Glow, which has all the things in it that he mentioned. And of course, as a listener or viewer of mine, you get a special deal. Do have a, I realized today as I was looking at his podcast that I've like, he might have had 6 interviews and I'm like 3 of them. So I'm like a superstar in Defiant Health. All right. So we have good relationship here. So I would like you to make sure that you get the discount. You can go to jjflizanes.com. I will link this underneath the video here on YouTube. It'll be in the show notes, a direct link, but the page is called Products We Love. It's like one of the first or second product. The link there goes directly to Gut to Glow, my link, which will give you, and then you type in the code. If you get 10% off of one order, or you get 15% off a subscription. So I would really encourage you to get the subscription because it's that 90-day mark where they did the study with the 25 women who lost 8 inches around their waist. Now, these were not average size women. They were larger. So the larger that you are, the more you can lose. So don't use that 8 inches as a marker, especially if you're somewhat normal size, thin or whatever. But regardless, so now we're not just looking at skin, we're looking at body fat composition, and we're looking at all the things that we just talked about in terms of all the benefits. So it's not just about the youthfulness of your skin. It's also about your emotions. It's about your hormones, and it's about retaining muscle if you're on a weight loss program, or gaining muscle if you're trying to build muscle and increase your metabolism. Yes?
Mm-hmm. You know what's scary, JJ, is as Americans get fatter and fatter, especially in their abdomens, abdominal visceral fat, the body runs out of places to put it. So now there's been an explosion in the last 20 years of something called ectopic fat. That's fat in other organs. So fat in the heart, epicardial fat that surrounds the coronary arteries, accelerates heart disease dramatically. Fat in your knees and hips, actually in the joint space, amplifies inflammation and erodes your cartilage faster. Fat in your pancreas kills off your pancreatic beta cells that produce insulin, and it can convert a type 2 diabetic to type 1 diabetic, and thereby relying on insulin for a lifetime. In muscle, very interesting, it's called myosteatosis. That is fat infiltration of muscle. And so a heavy person might have a lot of muscle, but it's infiltrated with fat. And so they lose strength, they lose all the metabolic advantages that you've pointed out from having muscle because it's infiltrated by fat. So all the things you and I are talking about, restoration of oxytocin, reduction of endotoxemia, restoration of missing nutrients like collagen and hyaluronic acid, and the anti-inflammatory effects of astaxanthin, all conspire to reduce fat in muscle and abdominal visceral fat while also increasing the actual muscle, not just the fat, but the muscle in muscle cells in muscle.
And of course, it wouldn't be a JJ show if I didn't want to plug a little bit about the mental, emotional piece of this, because if we're talking about why here are the facts of these different components that one needs for great results. But we have to come back again after 25 years as a personal trainer and ask, well, why am I doing this? What's the why? And is it just about, because for someone who isn't disciplined, who all of a sudden has a problem and needs to be disciplined, we're going to have a disconnect, and you're going to yo-yo from program to program because because you haven't connected to the why you're doing this. And sometimes people have to get to, I mean, unfortunately, this is who we are, the majority of people, and we all do this to some degree. We have to have pain until we actually change our lives. We have to come up against something that unpleasant in order for us to go, oh, should I learn something different? Do I need to figure out how to do this differently because this bad thing just happened to me? So for anyone who's out there who's proactive, this is why, I went from trainer who dealt with here's the prescriptions to go, well, why are people not doing it? Why aren't they sticking with it? Well, this comes back to the core wound work that I'm doing. And for those of you that don't know, I have a program called Rewiring Your Core Wound Patterns. The next one starts in March, but you can go ahead and apply, and we can always find you one of my trainers to work with if you can't join my group. But if we don't sort of understand the reason why why you're not disciplined enough or committed enough to make good choices, forget that it's white knuckling 100% of the time, because I'm not about that either. Like I said earlier, we had a really good time at Christmas. I do not for 1 second regret a thing I ate or did, because I'm disciplined enough to know that 80% of the time, that's not how I live. It's that 80-20 rule of what you do most of the time, not what you do 20% of the time. So if we're looking at, can you be disciplined? Can you care about yourself enough to make good choices 80% of the time? And if you can't, get some help. That's why I was successful for so long, because people don't know what they're doing in the gym, even if they think they do, when it comes to resistance training. So they hire somebody to help them with it, to make sure that they're safe, they're not going to get hurt, that they're being efficient, that they're making progress. And that's important, to hire or pay for help. So one of the things here that we're talking about is getting the help, the very inexpensive help compared to a diet drug, of getting gut to glow. Because give it 3 months, do your own study on yourself, take some pictures of your skin, do a couple measurements, weigh yourself if you must. Don't worry about the weight thing, just take some circumference measurements. And then again, don't change anything about your diet. Although I think that if you start to take it, you will want to win. So that might motivate you to make some changes in your exercise or your diet. But just remember that in case you're someone who has failed over and over again dieting, there's a reason. And it isn't just because you have the wrong program. It goes back to why or why not every moment you make the choice that you make about taking care of your body, or putting something in your mouth, or deciding to walk a little further or sit on the couch. Those are all mental, emotional pieces that can't be ignored. But when you start to take Gut to Glow and you feel better, you'll be motivated to want to do better. So, in the way of not just looking at this as something to restore my body's ability to create and build muscle and prevent muscle loss, think of it as your body's ability to also feel better, feel calmer, feel hopeful. So you want to take better care of yourself, so you are more disciplined to what you're doing. But I'd love to hear, especially from my audience, if anybody wants to take that challenge and do 3 months. And I'd love to see the pictures. I'd love to see, your journal. I'd love to see what came out of that for you, and to share, because I can tell you from taking it, I noticed a difference in my skin. Now, I didn't measure anything, but I'm going to now. I like to see, because I do go to the gym and I do work out and I do balance my hormones. So I can't wait to see the changes from committing to the 90 days and beyond. And I'd love to hear from you guys who also want to join me in doing it.
You make such a great point. You do such a good job, JJ, of driving home this idea that people self-sabotage or have other ways that impede their success. Because I see that. We can give them incredibly effective tools. That's what we have here. Restoring rotary, those missing nutrients, etc. The diet, wheat, grain, and sugar avoidance, not limiting fat, all that stuff. We can give people great tools, but if they have something in their past or something in their consciousness that keeps them, I see this happen. No matter how good the program, they want to fail, or they unconsciously make themselves fail. So you make a very important point. Also, that maybe some of your listeners have heard of this thing called Ozempic face, where people do one of those GLP agonist drugs and they lose whatever, 30, 40, 50 pounds, and they look 20 years older because they lost subcutaneous fat. Those drugs are not specific for abdominal fat. They preferentially, or at best 50-50, cause you to lose subcutaneous fat, fat below the skin. and you lose muscle. So if your face loses subcutaneous fat and muscle, now at 50, you look 70. So that's called, people call it, this was coined in the New York Times, Ozempic face. Well, think of what we're doing here. We're reducing abdominal fat specifically. There is some subcutaneous fat, but we're preferentially targeting abdominal visceral fat, the most problematic form of fat, while preserving or even increasing muscle. So, in our experience, people who do these things look 10 to 20 years younger, not older, younger. We see people losing their fine wrinkles, many over longer time. The deep wrinkles like forehead and nasolabial fold take longer because the volume of collagen and moisture is greater than fine wrinkles. But you'll see that typically fine wrinkles start to recede. And you can see it pretty clearly by 3 months or so. And then deep wrinkles a little longer. What will happen in 3 years? We don't know. But I imagine the benefits are cumulative, that we have a way to look younger. And of course, body shape and composition also younger. Restoration of muscle, restoration of libido, restoration of testosterone, reduction of inflammation, uh, uh, improved vaginal health, preservation of skeletal health. So, Jake, I don't think it's so. Yes, we're talking about shape and body composition, but in a lot of ways, I think we're also talking about turning the clock back 10 or 20 years. And I would even go so far as to say, I think what we're doing is making better human beings. Because if you experience that surge in oxytocin and you love your partner more, you love the people around you more, you're more accepting of other people's opinions, even if you disagree. You're better with strangers. You're better in social situations. You're less plagued by social anxiety. There's a lot of people, JJ, as you know, who have a real hard time going in social settings like a party or neighborhood gathering. That all goes away. You welcome. People say, I introduce myself to strangers in line for coffee at Starbucks. So, I don't think it's a stretch to say what we're really doing here beyond shape and body composition and losing weight is helping people become better human beings. And of course, if they add in your perspective of identifying those core problems that plague them, that prevent their success, I think we're giving people a formula for magnificent improvement in life and health.
I agree. It's a package and there's many components needed. And that's why for me, the physical part wasn't enough ultimately, but is very important. They both play. I got to the place as a trainer that I would say we can go from the inside out or from the outside in. Both will work depending on what you've been doing, but it depends on, but both are needed ultimately. We can't go just outside in or inside out. It has to be both. For sustainable change and for lifestyle change. People think dieting, that's one of the problems, as we all know, with the word dieting means temporary versus we look at what your diet is, what do you eat all the time. But when someone says I'm going on a diet, it means I'm going on a temporary. I mean, my lovely neighbors, I said, how long? We're like, oh, how long are you gonna do this? Oh, until we lose the weight. I'm thinking, okay. Um, but who knows? I mean, I made them I said, how you guys, because we see them often for food and things. And they said, oh, we're doing good. We just missed pizza. I said, great. Let me make you a 0 carb or 3 gram carb chicken pizza. And they're like, what? You can make it, and they're with dairy free and the whole thing. I made it and and they're like, this was hit the spot. I'm like, just come to me. Anything you miss, I can make it for you in a way you can have it. So this is the great thing about when you learn how to make foods in different ways that support your body. You don't have to miss all the things and you do it all the time. You do a great job on your Instagram. If anyone doesn't follow Dr. Davis on Instagram, he's got recipes all the time. I'm like bookmarking all the recipes. I'm like, okay. And I'm sure they are also in your cookbooks, but you're always putting recipes up on Instagram, which sound divine and amazing. And I have used some of them. So I would recommend also following Dr. Davis Infinite Health on Instagram. And I just want to put my hat in the ring for any time you want to do a study on sort of the average or healthier version of people and what a long-term study could benefit. I'd be happy to take all measurements, numbers, do whatever you need me to do. But I'm going to, again, strongly recommend that everybody go to jjflizanes.com, go to the page. It says products we love, get your subscription, which you can use. It's JJ15, I believe, is the code. So JJ15, just 2 J's and 1 5, get you 15% off your subscription. So, and then reach out. Let me know if you guys want to do a little group, and I love to compare results and see how everyone's doing. And on especially now, because the last time I had this conversation, it was really more skin, right? It was really more skin related. It wasn't about body composition. It wasn't about inches. It wasn't about necessarily, I mean, we did talk a little about oxytocin and sort of feeling, positive feelings, but now this has gone a couple layers deeper in like you just said, reducing inflammation, decreasing body fat, increasing muscle mass, all the things that everybody wants, especially as if you're already doing the work, if you're already exercising, then this is sort of your insurance pill that you're going to get the most out of it. And right, because as you said, like, I guess I'm going to the gym, but I don't know from time to time where my gut flora is. And if most likely I don't have enough Reuteri. So I probably need more to get the most out of the time I'm already spending at the gym exercising. So I would say this sounds like a really promising addition that will heed very efficient results for those of you that are already disciplined and committed to your health. We'll just take you to the next level. So, Dr. Davis, anything else about what's coming down the pipeline for you?
Well, activities and exploration of the microbiome is exploding. It's going to change everything. So tonight, for instance, I'm giving a talk on microbes, very important for female health. JJ, there's so much here to talk about. If a woman's going to get pregnant, she needs to be aware of Bifidobacter infantis because she probably lost it because she took antibiotics many times over her lifetime. And she's given antibiotics at delivery, and the child's often given antibiotics. So it wipes out this very critical, unlike adults, where Bifidobacter infantis is not that important. It's critical for an infant's health because if you get it, the baby has better neurological maturation, has a higher IQ, it's less prone to asthma and type 1 and type 2 diabetes, less likely to become obese as a teenager. So mom's lost it, baby doesn't get it by passage through the birth canal, nor with breastfeeding. So restoring infantis. And by the way, a woman can do that herself. We make yogurt out of it, for instance, or you can just buy the microbe. It's a commercial product called Evivo, E-V-I-V-O. I have no relationship. And that's a strain of Bifidobacter infantis. There's a strain of, since we're on the topic of female health, the vaginal microbiome is very different than the gastrointestinal microbiome. It's dominated by a species called Lactobacillus crispatus. And shockingly, JJ, a third of the world's female population has lost this microbe, just like having lost Reuteri. In this case, not quite as bad as almost everybody, but about a third of the world population. What happens when you lose crispatus? You're more likely to miscarry and lose your baby. You're more likely to have premature labor. And as you know, if you deliver a baby at 30 weeks, that is a catastrophe. That child's going to have problems for his or her entire lifetime, psychological, neurological, etc. So restoring crispatus, less likely to miscarry, less likely to have premature delivery, less likely to have vaginal infection like candida infections, numerous benefits. And so restoring crispatus, essential for a woman. But there's so much idea. What's happening if you have a high uric acid, hyperuricemia, which is very common. People can get kidney disease from it. It's a cardiovascular risk factor. You can take drugs to reduce it, or you can just get the species of Lactobacillus and Bifidobacteria that reduce the uric acid dramatically. So what I see happening, JJ, is the world of microbes and associated factors. So I'll throw in some non-microbial components like the collagen and hyaluronic acid, absent from modern diet. But the world of microbes is becoming so exciting, so powerful, it's going to, I think, overtake the awful, predatory, exploitative pharmaceutical industry.
Well, we hope so. And we have to do it sort of underground, I think, because otherwise we have to kind of play that game of share it, but don't share it too loud, because otherwise if it becomes a threat, then we're going to war. So I think we have to sort of be careful. I mean, right, like yes. And then how do we like underground kind of take over until people understand? Because people don't understand. They don't, I told you during COVID, I'm watching, what was it called with Michael Keaton? It was called Dope Sick. It's called Dope Sick. And they were talking, they're looking at what was the drug? The Oxycontin.
Oxycontin.
Yeah, Oxycontin and sort of the misuse of that, and then how, how the doctors were being told by the pharmaceutical reps from the pharmaceutical maker, oh, they took this much and they did well for a while, oh, double the dose, which will make our sales increase. Like, people are watching this during COVID and not making the freaking connection. I'm like, oh my God, are you not aware of what's going on? Made me crazy. Right. But again, there's only so much besides the lack of consciousness, there's only so much you can, people have to, like, we have to educate. That's what we're doing. That's why you have your show. That's why I have my show. That's why we do what we do. We want to educate people and give them tools that work. And then I believe, just like with, when the industry went more gluten-free, I used to tell people, nobody who wanted gluten-free products yelled at anybody who ate gluten and said, don't eat that. We just paid more for gluten-free products. So we went from, 1 year where there was one or two items on the market to an explosion of products on the market because there was a demand and because people voted with their dollars. They paid extra for, and that took off. So if I think that's like the most effective thing we can do is vote with our dollars and take your dollars away from the companies that aren't really on your side, that just want to make a buck and they don't really care what the root cause is. They're not really looking to restore your health. They're just looking to get rid of your symptoms in the quickest, fastest way, which also may have negative effects long term. Like, we haven't talked about the weight loss drugs and any effect long term on the kidneys, on the liver, and anything else, kind of side effects that could happen from that. We just talked about what would happen with your metabolic rate and with your body fat, and maybe you said diabetes, but what is a long-term effect of some of these drugs on your kidneys or on your liver and on our body trying to sort of make that better? How much nitrogen do we have to pull in order to buffer all this stuff going through the liver? I don't know, but I know that it can't be good. It can't be good. So I think we'll definitely have to do a show on female health, because even just that's little bit that you just talked about, I wrote down, and I would love to address that, since I know that probably 60% or 70% of my audience is female, and the other percent knows a female that they care about, so they can also share the show. So I appreciate you coming back. You'll definitely be back. Let's talk about that. Like, we'll talk off air about, what we have to offer in that way. I think it's a powerful topic. Of course, I'm interested. And if I'm interested, I bet you a lot of the women that listen to me are also interested. So I appreciate you always taking the time to come onto the show. And
Always happy to, JJ.
thank you so much. All right, everybody, go to jjflizanes.com. Products we love. Get your 15% off, JJ15 off of Gut to Glow, and let's change our bodies very simply and restore our body back to health.